I would ask them to read, if you could read their contract, because that will dig down into what kind of problems they might have mental health wise. I read a lot of gestational surrogate contracts and what they're told they can and can't do, what they can eat, if they can travel. I mean, it's really controlling. What happens if they are there's always selective reduction and termination clauses in their contracts. And it's up to the intended parents to decide when they selectively reduce or terminate the pregnancy.
Hi there, this is Miriam Diallo, APLOG's Communications Manager, and before we jump into today's episode, I just wanted to quickly remind you all that this is part 2 of a 2-part conversation between Dr. Christina Francis, our CEO, and Jennifer Lahl of the Center for Bioethics and Culture. Dr. Francis and Jennifer are currently discussing the topic of gestational surrogacy, and in this part of the conversation, they're going over some ethically concerning situations that have arisen through this practice. If you want to get fully caught up on part 1, you can go back through our previous episodes to last week's episode. Otherwise, feel free to jump right in, and I hope you enjoy.
And I think there would be a temptation to think that, oh, well, sure, Jennifer, you picked the worst of the worst cases, to highlight in your film. And what would you say to somebody who said, well, I'm sure that this is not the majority of the cases, or I'm sure these are just exceptions. What, now, I can't remember now exactly what year you produced Breeders, but I know it's been several years since then. So between that you were doing for that film and your ongoing research and ongoing conversations that you have had with women and with families, are these exceptions, or would you say that this is more common than probably people are aware of?
I would say it's more common than people are aware of. And I would also say, I like this phrase, what doesn't count doesn't get counted. So how many of these women, whether they sold their eggs, whether they served as gestational surrogate, had complications, maybe didn't end up in a high-risk pregnancy center, maybe were able to be managed, maybe were able to successfully deliver. But, in our own research showed, we studied, interviewed over 100 gestational surrogates just here in the U.S. I think about 97 made it into the final study because we had to boot a few out because they didn't meet some of the selection criteria. But, they overwhelmingly report high rates of chronic illness, ongoing. If you have severe preeclampsia, you're at risk for all kinds of things for the rest of your life, especially related to your heart. But for people that say that, I hear that all the time. I hear people say, well, my sister used a surrogate and, oh, it was just beautiful. And they're all just friends and they come get together on birthdays. And I just say, well, you're fortunate then. It's like the smoker who smokes who doesn't get lung cancer. It's like the woman who donates her eggs and doesn't, get OHSS and a torsioned ovary and, loses her own fertility and 3 years later has breast cancer. We don't take those kind of chances with smoking. Most people who smoke don't get lung cancer. The overwhelming majority of smokers don't get lung cancer. And we still say, don't take the risk. And do you want to be the person that used Michelle Reeves to help you have a baby? And then I know another surrogate, she died as well. And, there's an interview of me interviewing the father on our YouTube channel. And it's not in the recording because it was something he didn't feel comfortable about talking, but the intended parents, they're in therapy. I mean, you are taking care of this newborn baby who, an hour ago, the mother died. It's traumatic for so many people. And every 13, 15 minutes in the US, somebody dies of waiting for a kidney transplant or an organ donation. And we don't say, well, let's buy and sell organs. We don't say, you have 2 kidneys, you can give one to this guy who's about to die. And we don't take the fact that the seriousness of somebody who's literally life is hanging in the balance and change public policy because we don't want people to die because they could just live happily ever after with a kidney transplant. But for babies, we get weak-kneed, we are sympathetic, and we just sort of go, well, we're not going to look at the risks and the harm, and we're just going to do this and hope. And I'm looking at a Minnesota bill right now, and it's a regulatory bill, And how do you regulate away these kind of risks? How do you pass regulation that says the surrogate won't die? The surrogate won't suffer postpartum depression. The baby will go home and be raised in a loving home, even though some 50-year-old Chinese man's, taking it back to China. How do you pass? It'd be like passing a law that says you're not going to be harmed from smoking. You can't do it. You just say don't do it.
Right, right. Absolutely. Well, and I think that you hit on, and I know we're running out of time. We may need to round back and do another one where we dig into this a little bit more. But I think you hit on a really key point too, in that when you said that the doctor that was sort of stuck in the middle said, well, who is my patient? And these people who I'm kind of beholden to and what I'm doing paid a lot of money. This is a transactional thing. And I think we need to remember that there are actual human beings involved in these transactions. And are we okay with the buying and selling of human beings? We're not when it comes to human beings who have already lived their life. When we talk about sex trafficking and human trafficking, people are rightly against that because human beings should not be for sale. But in this issue, we allow human beings to be for sale, whether it be the women whose wombs are being sold, essentially, or the children who are being sold, and that brings up very difficult circumstances, I think, for the physicians involved. Exactly what you said, that they are put in the middle. One last thing I want to ask you, Jennifer, before we go, because many of our listeners are physicians or midwives or people who are providing obstetric care. So I'd like to ask you, in addition to the medical risks, that we talked about, increased risk of preeclampsia and preterm birth and growth restriction and things like that, I think specifically I would love to hear from you about the mental health considerations so if we're providing obstetric care to a gestational surrogate, what are some of the mental health considerations that we need to keep in mind, and maybe some warning signs as well? Because certainly, we're mandatory reporters if we suspect trafficking, if we suspect abuse. And I'm just thinking that if we're taking care of a gestational surrogate, what are some things that maybe we should be looking out for to think maybe she's essentially being abused in this situation and no one's looking out for her needs, that maybe we could try to advocate for her? Are there some things that we should be looking out for as physicians?
Well, I think I would ask questions about how does she view her connection, her role. Get her to tell you, because I would submit that big fertility grooms these women. They're told never to say they're pregnant. They're on a journey. So if you get them talking, they'll talk about their journey, and they're helping in this sort of subservient. I would ask them to read, if you could read their contract, because that will dig down into what kind of problems they might have mental health wise. I read a lot of gestational surrogate contracts and what they're told they can and can't do, what they can eat, if they can travel. I mean, it's really controlling. What happens if they are there's always selective reduction and termination clauses in their contracts. And it's up to the intended parents to decide when they selectively reduce or terminate the pregnancy, and get them to explain to you their understanding of that, because they've already obviously signed this contract already that probably has that kind of language in it.
Sure.
I would look at the contract and see if it's explicitly talked about what happens if they're harmed. What happens if they die? What happens? Some contracts I read that will say if you have to have a hysterectomy and you lose your uterus, we'll pay you $5,000 extra. If you lose a fallopian tube or an ovary, we'll pay you $25. So there's actual price tag. And I would just ask them about, are they worried about baby blues, postpartum depression? How are their children in the home? This is really damaging, I think, to children in the home that watch their mothers do this. One little boy of a mom in Breeders, he just sort of would chime up at the grocery store when they would ask her, are you hoping for a little brother or a little sister, when they would see him with his pregnant mom? Oh, we're not keeping this baby. And what does that do to the psyche of a mother who's trying to navigate explaining this to little children in the home? And just know that this postpartum rise is real. And have they had a history of postpartum depression with their other pregnancies? If they say no, maybe it might be something to be heightened to look into when they deliver this child and they do go home with no baby and empty arms. Financially, what are they really like financially? Kelly secretly didn't tell people, but she was married to a man who was a real bad drug addict. And as soon as money would come in, it would go out. And she'd be left to, okay, well, I've got to have another baby for somebody. What's going on in the home financially? Is there a husband in the home? This is stressful in a marriage. When you're laying in bed with your wife who's pregnant with somebody else's baby and you feel perhaps inadequate that your wife has had to do this because there's no financial provision that you're able to meet, that causes, problems within just the marital bed.
Yeah. Wow. So many things that, uh, yeah, that just come to mind. But, and I do see those of us who are providing obstetric care as hopefully we would be able to stave off these significant ethical problems before they occur. But as you said, oftentimes when we're coming into contact with women in this situation, it will have already happened. And so I think it's so important for us to be aware of the situation that they're finding themselves in so that we can be someone who's providing care for them, not just a part of this transactional relationship.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that's why reading the contract is really important,
yeah,
especially if you're going to be delivering that baby and in that process of the pregnancy, because you have to see what kind of language is in there, if things go wrong, and what rights. I don't really like using the word rights, but in this case, what rights does this woman have to advocate for herself when she's been hired to do a job?
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I hope that too, women that might be listening to this who maybe have considered entering into a gestational surrogacy contract and serving as a gestational surrogate will hopefully hear this and see your work and listen to the stories of other women and be able to avoid just the many issues that exist with this. And I think we need to continue to bring awareness to this issue. Certainly, it has increased in frequency since you first started doing your work in this area, and it's very important if we claim to care about women and ensuring that women are empowered and have received the best healthcare possible and receive all the support that they need, then we really should be taking a hard look at what's going on through the surrogacy industry right now and advocating for women to not be forced into this kind of situation. Jennifer, I know there's so much more that we could talk about, and like I said, I think maybe we'll round back and do another session at some point so we can dig even deeper. But for
I'll
now,
come at your next conference.
yes, absolutely, we would love to have you back. Absolutely, we're going to put you down on the list for the 2026 conference. So. Um, in the meantime, though, Jennifer, where can listeners go to find out more about the work that you are doing and the center's doing, and find these films so that they can watch them and become more informed?
Yeah, I mean, the best place is just to go to the website, cbc-network.org. You'll find all of our film links there to the YouTube channel. You'll find our research that Callie Fell and I did. We have a comprehensive report on assisted reproductive technology that's broken down, thinking about being an egg donor, thinking about being a surrogate, thinking about buying eggs, thinking about renting a womb, and all the risks. It's a scientific paper with all the most recent research. So I think the website, if they want to follow my work personally, I am very active on X at Jennifer Lahl. And I'm
Perfect.
always ranting and raving on X.
Perfect. Well, we will put in the show notes Jennifer's handle on X as well as the website. So, and I would highly encourage people to go to the website to watch her films, to become more informed, so that we can continue to raise awareness of this very, very important issue. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate the work that you are doing to bring awareness to the women who really have been left behind because of this, and who no one is talking about. So thank you so much for that. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. If you, as Jennifer mentioned, our conference, this year's conference is coming up at the end of February in Orlando. If there's still time to register, go to conference.applog.org and register to join us for a bevy of really important discussions. And hopefully we'll have Jennifer on the lineup for our 2026 conference. So if you like this episode, please be sure to give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube, or if you're listening on a podcast app, please give us a 5-star review so that our content can get out to more people. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to joining you on our next episode.